Welcome back into the Dead Arm Sports Podcast. Josh and Jell coming at you on a holiday. Yeah,
What
we're
it
working holidays. It's the
do?
4th of July. And Jell, I'm going to kick it right off with the question of the day. I want to know, how many bush lights did you consume this weekend?
I only brought six with me. It was just a
Okay.
1 day trip, but I did bring six other Lineys, summer shandies. So it was a little mixture of that, and then jacked a few Trulies off some others, and there was some hard liquor involved. So only six lattes. If I was going
Okay.
strictly bush, that number would be I've been down there for 2 nights and polished off a nice 30. So
Attaboy.
get her done.
Yes.
Hey, when you're on the lake, out in the sun the whole time, it's easy to just keep crushing them.
Yeah, that was my Friday. I had quite a few blue smoothies, or I guess green smoothies, because it's the for the farmers
For the
can.
farmers, John Deere Classic for the farmers.
Yes, we'll be talking about that a little bit later on today and our lack of watching it. But no, had quite a few of those this last weekend, so it's a good time. Spent some time out on the lake as well, and yeah, ready to get back to it. Had a lot of big news come down this weekend. Going to talk a lot of college football today, and then recap the John Deere to end it. But yeah, I'm excited to get into this. Let's get the plugs out of the way here, Jel, so we can dive right in. We can be found at Dead Arm Sports, Twitter, Instagram. Check us out on Facebook at Dead Arm Sports. Be the first thing that pops up. We are on YouTube Live for sure on Mondays, so check us out there. We've got the chat box going, so ask us any questions if you're tuning in. Otherwise,
And again, for like right now we are live. I just got a notification that we are live. So make sure that you subscribe, turn on alerts, and you'll get that same notification that I just got that just came over on my phone.
yeah, so that way you'll know. You can click on that and hop in. And again, ask us any questions, or you keep an eye on that chat box the whole time. And yeah, subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite listening platform. Send us a screenshot of that review. Get you some sticker swag sent out in the mail. Gel, sipping on anything fun or on the old water train like myself?
Oh, I had to get off the water train. That was my morning. Back to I had some couple summer shandies left over, so rocking the nice old liney summer shandy.
Love it.
It is like 90 it's like 99 degrees here, so summer shandy's hitting the spot. Even though I'm indoors, my apartment's still hot. I'm still sweaty. So with the
probably
AC,
because that fire's blazing in the background. You gotta turn the fire off.
That's a good point. Shouldn't have brought in all that new firewood.
Yeah, geez, what were you thinking?
One job.
All right, so let's get right into it, Gel. This news dropped on, was it Thursday?
Thursday, I think. Sounds
Thursday,
right. Thursday,
yeah.
Friday.
Thursday. And it was huge. It was one that I have been waiting all weekend to talk about this, get your take on it. And that's USC, University of Southern California, and the University of California, Los Angeles are now going to be a part of the Big Ten starting in the 2024 season. So absolutely huge news. Those are two of the premier programs in that Pac-12 that are now jumping ship over to the Big Ten. And yeah, I guess just initial thoughts on this. I mean, I was absolutely shocked when I saw that blowing up on Twitter. It had come from a source I hadn't really heard of, had a check mark on it on Twitter. And then all of a sudden, every other news outlet started popping up with this is happening. It's just a matter of time before it's announced. And maybe an hour or two later, we got that announcement that it was official. The schools' Twitters were tweeting out that they're going to be part of the Big Ten. So it was, it's exciting. It's interesting to me as well that the Big Ten is going to be pretty much coast to coast from Maryland and Rutgers all the way over to LA. So that's kind of
literally New York to LA.
Yeah. So what were your thoughts originally on this when you saw it come out?
I mean, okay, first off, the shock factor of how quick it happened. There was the rumor in the morning that came out about USC, UCLA potentially joining the Big Ten. And by the evening, it was done that they're joining in 2024. It's like, normally you hear these rumors and it takes a while for everything to be finalized. And I guess they were just that close to finalizing every deal by the time the rumors even began, which pretty impressive that there were no leaks before the day that the deal was done. Like how does that even happen? Look at every other sports dealing that's been done recently, or political dealing that's been done, like, or any sort of like, business dealing, whether that's Elon buying Twitter. I mean, those rumors started a long time ago, and that deal still isn't done. Like, although Elon probably is the one like, I'm going to buy Twitter. So I guess that doesn't really count, but, no, I mean, just the initial shock of how quick it happened. And it, and I also go back, maybe we might be looking a decade or so ago when there were rumors that Texas was going to join the Pac-12. And that obviously never came to fruition. I think the Big 12 said, okay, here, take my money, right. Stay with us, please. That's effectively what USC and UCLA, that's the position that they're in. Big Ten's like, let me give you my money. They're like, we'll take it. Big Ten deal, or the Pac-12 deal that USC and UCLA had, their TV deal that the Pac-12 has set up, each school gets about $30 million per year. The current deal within the Big Ten, each school gets $70 million per year from the new deal that they got with Fox.
It's a little bit of a promotion.
It's a little chunk of change.
Yeah.
It's only like a 115-ish% bump. That's not too bad. No. I'll take that on my salary.
Right.
But and that deal with Fox with the Big Ten is up in 2024, which is when USC and UCLA are joining. With those two schools joining and Fox now getting that LA market where Fox is based, they are based in LA. You'd imagine that Fox had a lot to do with this change and saying, look, we're giving you $70 million a year now. We can bump that up to $100 million a school if you get these two LA schools into your conference, or $100 million. Let's just start the figures at $100 million. Again, that's complete speculation. That's not an announced figure or anything, but theoretically, Fox probably had some influence in making this happen and saying, hey, USC, you got Lincoln Riley, you got all these transfers, Caleb Williams, you're going to have now some of the best recruiting classes in the nation. We want you in. UCLA, we want you in for the LA brand to help enhance the Fox brand. That's all this is. Everything revolves around these TV deals. So now let's say taking that $30 million from the Pac-12 in a conference that's been down for, I guess, basically since the last time USC was genuinely dominant, back when they had Pete Carroll, Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush. I
mean, Oregon made a playoff once in there, but that was
but you can't even say that the conference as a whole at that time.
No, it hasn't been.
I mean,
great.
It didn't have the same impact when you got when USC was dominating. That impact was a lot different than when Oregon was dominating, or when Stanford with Harbaugh was dominating. They've had flash in the pan schools. Washington has had their occasional year or two, but as in general, the Pac-12 has kind of been on a bit of a decline, at least in terms of football, I feel like. And so that's why they're only getting, their TV rights are only $30 million a year, where right now they're at 70. In theory, they could break that $100 million of revenue every year just from that TV deal.
Yeah, well, and it's hard. I mean, they're at a disadvantage already being 2 hours behind Central. I mean, East Coast, you're not staying up till 1 a.m, finishing a Pac-12 game, even if you were a college football fan. I mean, I find myself in the Central time zone. I'll turn it on at like 9-10 o'clock when it kicks off. And then all of a sudden it's like halftime. And I'm like, I should probably just get to bed. And it's just, I mean, you can't really get a huge viewership outside of just that West Coast. And no, it'll be interesting. And what do you think is next for the Pac-12 here? I mean, you lose the two LA teams, and what do you see happening? I mean, the Big 12 obviously losing Texas and Oklahoma coming up. They're bringing in Cincinnati, UCF, so they're at least kind of trying to bring in other programs to fill those two spots just for numbers. But do you see teams still flip flopping here, the combining conferences somehow, or what do you see happening?
I think plenty of movement is still to happen on both sides. I want to stay just really quick in between, like before we jump into what's to come. I've got just like, I guess I want to know kind of I want to jump into that. But before we do that, I kind of want to see just, I want to stick with the Big Ten right now. Do you think that there's any legitimate chance of any specific rivalries or any rivalries, like true rivalries coming out of this? I mean, that's what we love about college football is the rivalries and the tradition. USC, UCLA coming to the Big Ten. Do you think that there's going to be true hot blood, I guess, between these schools? I mean, it's just a complete change in a completely different culture. Obviously, the LA culture versus the Midwest culture. I guess, what do you see just for the future of the Big Ten in terms of rivalries, traditions? Do you think this 9 a.m. kickoff that apparently is that's going to be the reality for UCLA and USC when they're playing home games, a 9 a.m. kickoff? Do you see that being, continuing as a reality for them?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the Big Ten obviously does with that, with the schedule, just with, I mean, you can't really change any of the time slots. Maybe if USC is going to the East Coast, they try and make that 2:30 start as opposed to the traditional 11 o'clock kickoff or the big noon kickoff. And maybe you have one of those a season if it's maybe not as big of a game, or maybe a bigger game to start getting some of that market. But as far as the rivalries go, I think you've got USC, UCLA that will go ahead and obviously still be rivals, both teams in LA, and they're two historic programs. So I do like that aspect of them coming into the Big Ten, but it's going to take a few years for any other sort of rivalry or anything like that. So they're going to have to, I mean, they haven't really played any of the Big Ten teams historically that often, outside of if you do add a Notre Dame into the mix, into the Big Ten, which that's been talked about for a long time. And we'll see if any of this shifting ends up Notre Dame joining a conference here coming up. But Notre Dame usually plays USC every single year, so that could potentially be a rivalry if
that's a good
Notre
point.
Dame comes in. But outside of that, it's going to take a few years to get any sort of rivalry for USC and any of the other Big Ten teams currently, I think. But it is kind of cool, though, that you think about it now, that if one of the either USC, UCLA teams is at home for the week, you're going to have Big Ten football on the TV from 11 a.m. until midnight. So that's actually pretty sweet. And I think that was a huge factor for the Big Ten adding these teams, is that they can just monopolize Saturdays now with kickoffs at every single time slot.
I mean, speaking of going coast to coast, we have to bring up the recruiting discussion of, now that the Big Ten has access to these LA players. The skill position players that come out of California is astounding. It's, the wide receivers and the quarterbacks. Shoot, Bryce Young, DJ Ukulele, CJ Stroud. Those are all 5-star quarterbacks that came out of California. I guess, I guess ultimately my question is, does this result in an advantage now for the Big Ten, for other Big Ten schools, kind of given that you're going to be able to go, let's say you've got an away game, as you said, in UCLA or at UCLA or at USC. You're going to be able to now get hopefully some additional face time with some of these California recruits. Do you see that as an advantage, or vice versa? Now, if let's say you're Iowa, let's say you're Wisconsin, or let's say you're Iowa, Wisconsin, your bread and butter is these giant offensive linemen and explosive defensive linemen, big boys in the middle, linebacking core, always awesome. Now with USC and UCLA coming to your school, coming into your territory, they now have access, a little bit easier access to your, the type of recruits that you tend to win. You win those recruiting battles because you don't have the competition of a USC, a UCLA, and that LA weather, that LA market where the NIL money is, let's be honest, the NIL money is going to be a little bit different at USC, at UCLA versus in Iowa versus, in Illinois, a Penn State, a Minnesota. So do you look at this as maybe a recruiting advantage for the traditional Big Ten teams or a potential disadvantage and losing out on potential recruits?
I kind of see it both ways. It doesn't really help answer your question, but I see UCLA, USC having an advantage going into some of the other Big Ten school areas and saying that, hey, you can come out and play for us, especially if they can turn their programs around. And we travel back here every year, at least to the area, to play some of these teams. Your friends, family can still come down, catch a game, and you can be in the LA market for NIL deals, all of that stuff. And now vice versa, some of the bigger programs that are in the conference, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, I think it makes it a lot easier for them to possibly hop into LA and say, hey, you guys are part of the Big Ten now. Your friends, family are going to be able to see us on TV all the time. And we're going to be making trips here maybe every other year, maybe every year, depending on how their schedule lines up, where some of those kids may end up going to some of those other programs. But ultimately, if USC, UCLA get back to some of their dominance that they had historically, I mean, there are two historic programs that have been really solid, not recently, but in the past.
When's the last? Okay. I need to cut you off because when's the last time UCLA has been relevant in football?
I mean, it's been a while, but they've been
a long
relevant.
time.
Yeah, but it's still a huge school. You play in the Rose Bowl that, I mean, who wouldn't want to play your home games there? And if they can get back to being relevant again, nobody's going to really want to leave LA. Those are the two schools that a lot of LA kids want to go to. And if they're good and in the conversation for playoff every year, I don't see people leaving really either.
You drop me with a beautiful transition. Is the Rose Bowl dead? I mean, traditionally it's been the Big Ten versus the Pac-12. It changed once the college football playoff came around a little bit, where now that just became, effectively what was a semifinal or a final. But is the tradition of the Rose Bowl dead at this point?
With your classic Big Ten, Pac-12 in 2024, well, I guess it would be 2025 technically.
It's a 2024 season, so I guess January 1, 2025.
January 1, 2025. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be Big Ten versus Pac-12, or else, I mean, Big Ten's just going to absolutely dominate outside of maybe Oregon, maybe Washington, maybe Utah otherwise. And who knows what ends up happening with those schools. I mean, everybody's going to have to try and figure out what's going on now with those two teams leaving. I have a question too, before we get really off topic here and start jumping into other stuff too. Do you think Lincoln Riley knew that this was a potential move on the horizon when he took that job at USC? Do you think USC, obviously they had to have somewhat have been in talks, so he had to have known, right?
1,000%.
Okay.
I mean, again, the fact that it's not like when those rumors came out on Thursday morning, that was the beginning of the discussions, and that and everything was finalized by that evening. These discussions have been going on. You have to imagine it could be a 12-month discussion where it's been going on. So, and the fact that they knew they had the money to pay for that Lincoln Riley contract, which included them USC buying his house in Norman. They bought his house in Norman, and he's got, all this unlimited access to PJs. That's private jets for you, you common folk out there. Uncrustables, PB&J. What was I going? Where was I going? No, I mean, they knew that they could afford whatever Lincoln needed because of this additional money that they're getting by joining the Big Ten. So if Lincoln wanted, I think his deal is where he's making around $9 million. If he wanted 15, they'd say, hell yeah, we got $6 extra million a year in the bank for you, but you got to earn it. So maybe that's it. But yeah, I think Lincoln, he had to know about this because why would, if he didn't know about that and the Big Ten just started scooping up teams and the SEC continues to scoop up teams and USC wasn't part of it, then Lincoln Riley joins a team that is ultimately, sadly, potentially irrelevant. So I think that's why he had to know.
Yeah. No, I agree completely with that. I think that was one of the discussions and why he ended up going there, that he's going to have access to some of the Big Ten schools, joining the Big Ten and everything. So
speaking of, the Big Ten, the SEC, ultimately it looks like those are going to be the two conferences that end up taking over the college football landscape. I mean, right now, or I shouldn't say right now, but so right now each conference has 14 teams. In 2025, Texas and Oklahoma are joining the SEC. In 2024, USC, UCLA are joining the Big Ten. So that puts each conference at 16 teams. I can't imagine this is the end of conferences, teams changing conferences. I mean, what do you think for just the future of the NCAA, whether that's football? I'd imagine also football, basketball teams are going to be following each other and staying in the same conference. What do you see going forward in terms of additional further conference realignment? I know you mentioned Notre Dame earlier.
Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame's always been the one that I think if that domino falls and they end up joining the Big Ten, then you're going to start seeing a huge shift in college football, and it's going to end up turning into two super conferences with the Big Ten and the SEC. SEC has already been rumored to wanting to add Clemson, Florida State, Miami, but ACC, their TV deal runs quite a bit longer. I think they just extended it a couple of years ago, so they're looking at, I think it's probably
2035 with the ACC.
So if they wanted to leave, I think the ACC teams, I saw somewhere that it's like a 8-figure sum that would be owed to have them be able to get bought out of their contract and be able to flip conferences. So it's a huge chunk of change there. But yeah, I could see those schools going in. They're kind of that embodied program there that they fit into the SEC. I think Miami, if they can get back to relevance, that's a huge powerhouse market. Clemson's been a powerhouse the last few years, and Florida State could be there, but they're obviously way down right now. But I'm just curious too on what ends up happening with the Big 12 right now, the Pac-12. There's been rumors that the Big 12 is going to be trying to add a few teams from the Pac-12. I've heard Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and then BYU possibly coming into the Big 12 too. So
isn't BYU coming over in with Cincinnati? What is it? Cincinnati, UCF, BYU, and Houston? I thought that was already done, that they were coming over.
Maybe
to the
it
Big
is
12.
then that they were coming over, but yeah, if they can add those two Arizona schools too and further take a huge hit on the Pac-12. The problem right now is none of those markets are huge with the Pac-12, that I just don't know what happens from there. I mean, Washington, Oregon, but those aren't major markets at all for TV. Oregon, like you said, hasn't been relevant for
quack
that long. And yeah,
I think that Oregon could be one of those teams though that does make its way into the Big Ten along with Washington, and maybe a wild card here could be Colorado. The Buffaloes get that Denver market. That's a market that right now is kind of untapped. Yeah, their basketball team is significantly better than their football team, but it's still the Denver market, which continues to grow, and more money keeps getting filtered into that Denver market. So there may be business opportunities there. I bring up Oregon because of the influence that Phil Knight has right now. He's got major impact on everything college sports, obviously with the Nike deal. Washington, I just put up there thinking that's an easy, that would just be
Yeah,
an
I
easy
think
team to throw
them
in.
and
The
Oregon are
Huskies,
almost a package deal. I feel like at this point,
probably.
wherever one goes, I think the other one's going to end up at. But no, it would make sense to add Colorado in too and just get a team to kind of be in the middle of the rest of the Big Ten, and then UCLA and USC. Again, it's look at the travel schedule those teams are going to have for conference.
You got a 6-hour flight if you're UCLA or USC playing at Rutgers. That's a 6-hour flight. That's a full 6 hours.
And the time change.
Granted, it's not like you're walking cross country where it used to take 30 years to go from one side of the country to the other. But still, that is a grueling schedule. I mean, that's a full day of travel right there. And I don't know. I guess I just see, I guess from the Big Ten, I see those three teams that I mentioned from the Pac-12 joining Washington, Oregon, Colorado, snagging Notre Dame, finishing that would make that a 20-team conference. That leaves the SEC with a 16 teams. Ideally, then they would want to add 4 more.
Yeah. So if they
not including Texas, Oklahoma. So I would think the 3 teams that you mentioned,
yeah. So
Clemson,
who would be that
Miami,
fourth
Florida
then
State,
you'd throw in?
I mean, what do you think about UNC? It would suck to break up that UNC Duke thing. All of this kind of sucks, and I want to get into that later. But who's that last team then? Is it UNC, or do they grab another team from the Big 12, a Baylor, a Baylor? I mean, TCU doesn't, I don't think, in Oklahoma State.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe an Oklahoma State or a Baylor would make sense a little bit, but I don't. Baylor, yeah.
There's nobody else left in the Big 12. You're not going to grab TCU.
No, and Baylor wouldn't be bad. Their football program, obviously, with Dave Aranda there, has been awesome the last couple of years.
And their basketball the last couple of years has been
in both
dominant.
men's and women's sports have been awesome. So that would definitely be a huge asset to the SEC, because obviously they don't want to just bring in a school to bring in a school. They're still picking and choosing, so that way they can have the best programs in their conference too.
Yeah,
so no, those would be the only ones that I can think of offhand that would make sense. I mean, Kansas's basketball would be good, but they aren't an SEC team to me. That's more
Kansas
of a Big Ten.
More fits for the Big Ten.
The Big Ten, yeah.
Yeah, maybe you go after Kansas basketball instead of Colorado or instead of Washington, and that's your additional team to at least have the basketball presence. Obviously, they're never competitive in football, but but they're coming off a national title. Way to go, Sark. Douche. Yeah, I guess, next question has to, for me, revolves around the college football playoff. Right now, we're still at 4 teams. That has to expand by the time you get to 2024, 2025, I would think. And you're going to have, if you have these 2, quote unquote, super conferences, that would have to expand. And then to follow that up, how many non-Big Ten SEC teams are even going to make that playoff? I mean, if you're sitting there in the Pac-12, Big 12, one of the group of 5 conferences, if those are going to even exist in a couple of years, how many of those teams, even ACC, if those top 3 teams from the ACC leave, what does the future of the college football playoff look like with all of this?
I would almost see it would just be like, take your teams from the Big Ten, take your teams from the SEC, and have a playoff that way. I read somewhere today when I was going through Twitter, sorry, I don't remember the source, but if Clemson, Florida State, and Miami jump into the SEC, along with Texas and Oklahoma coming over, and then obviously USC, UCLA coming into the Big Ten, the only 2 schools in the history of the playoffs, college football playoffs, that have made it in there that wouldn't be a part of those 2 conferences is Oregon 1 year and Washington 1 year. Yep. So they wouldn't really even have a case, I don't think, to even go in unless one team was undefeated. So maybe you take your top 3 teams from the Big Ten, SEC, you take the next best team from either of those conferences. And then if there's one at large or something like that, if it's at 8, that's the only thing I could see.
At this point would be a Big 12 team.
Yeah.
So that So you could grab one of those or grab them.
Or you have Big 12 versus the Pac-12 champion. They play, and whoever wins that game gets into the playoff or something too.
This is going to get messy.
And then what do you do if that's the case with the rest of the ACC? Because you're going to have ACC teams that are still in.
Maybe you do maybe you do 2 play-in games, and it's like you rank the best of like the Big 12, like Big 12 winner, Pac-12 winner, ACC winner, and a group of 5 top seed, and you seed them, and they have like 2 play-in games. You've got 3 Big 10, 3 SEC, the 2 play-in game winners. That forms your tournament of 8. That's crazy.
Yeah.
What? I don't know what else it is. I don't know how else you would. That'd be the only other way to get other teams involved. Otherwise, you could just see 4 Big 10, 4 SEC, and screw the rest of college football, which that's kind of what I see more likely happening, is screw the rest of college football. Sadly.
Yeah, I'd like to see too, once the SEC and Big 10 get to 16 teams, it'd be really cool if they did like what the Big 10 and the ACC do during the basketball season, where every year you have just like one head-to-head matchup and kind of rotate that around, because you don't see a lot of Big 10 SEC matchups at all. It'd be pretty cool to have that as one of your maybe opening weekend games or something like that. It's a non-conference crossover game, or maybe a little bit farther into the season. I know the SEC usually likes to have their cupcake games that week before their rivalry week at the end of the season, but no, I think that would be pretty cool. And no, I think this is just the start of the dominoes falling right now. And it's going to be very interesting to see once the 2024 season rolls around, what the new conference is and what this final product looks like, or where at least we're sitting at. Maybe at that point in time, a couple of the teams from the ACC are like, all right, we're not too far away now from our TV deal being done. We're few years closer at least, and maybe that number's moved down for them to get out of their contracts, and you got more teams jump in, or it'll be interesting to see what happens from this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the very obvious positive to this is that it's gonna be way more likely that you're not gonna see Alabama versus Eastern middle of Tennessee State. Like that's those games hopefully get eliminated. You're not going to see Michigan playing,
Appalachian State
JV, like JV of Rutgers. Like that's hopefully eliminated. Chattanooga, get that shit out of here.
Yeah.
Central whatever, random middle of the country school that can get out of here. So hopefully the positive here is that you could have like you said, Big 10 ACC challenge. It could be a Big 10 SEC challenge in football, and each team, gets matched up that way. That would be a badass way, because right now, Labor Day weekend is the weekend before the NFL starts. That's a weekend that the NCAA, that college football needs to dominate. And this is the easiest way to do that, by setting up 10 matchups. Or right now, I guess it'd be 8 matchups with 16 in each conference, 16 matchups. Right.
You got there eventually.
Math.
Speaking of sponsoring today's episode, math.
Hashtag not a sponsor. I need to go back to one other thing you said before we move on. You said that the buyout for these ACC teams is 8 figures. The max, if it's 8 figures, the max is $99,999,999. If you're Clemson and the SEC says, we're going to give you $100,000 a year to join our conference, you make up that buyout with the snap of a finger. Just from TV, you're going to have mad booster money as well. And then from there on, you're making way more money. I don't see that buyout, that 8-figure buyout, as being a huge hindrance for teams that are invited to the SEC.
No, it probably wouldn't be. But again, it depends on where that money they're going to be end up getting that. Because is it coming out? They're getting that right off the bat, or are they going to have to front that money before they even get to the SEC. If the SEC helps them out and says, hey, we really want you to come over here, here's this, we'll pay your buyout, or we'll split the buyout with you or whatever, then yeah, it makes it a lot easier. But if they have to come up with that right away, it might get a little more tricky.
It's a good point. That's fair.
But no, I'm excited for it. I was excited when I saw this news. Again, it's kind of wonky that we're getting, again, California teams be in the Big Ten when it's been historically Midwest, but I'm all for the expansion of college football. Like I said, I like college football more than the NFL. So this is exciting to me. And I just, again, want to see where everything shakes out and see if we can get Oregon, Washington into the Big Ten, or what ends up happening with them, what ends up happening with the Oregon States of the world or the Kansas States, like some of those programs that aren't as relevant for college football, and see what ends up happening to them. Is it just going to end up turning into the Big Ten and the SEC, where those schools are pretty much just going to be making the Meineke Car Care Bowl or whatever bowl game it is, and that's the extent of as far as their season can get? It'll be interesting to see what ends up happening.
The Outback Bowl, I think this past season was their last time sponsoring a bowl game. Outback Steakhouse. The Outback Bowl is no longer. That's a little sad. That was where the mediocre Big Ten teams would always fall.
Oh yeah.
It's
usually
over
an SEC
now.
matchup too.
It's over, man. That's a little bit of a kick in the ass.
Well, and at this rate too, are bowl games just on their way out too? I mean, like you had talked about it earlier on, the Rose Bowl in 2024, it's not going to be as premier as it used to be with the historic Big Ten versus Pac-12 team. I mean, I don't know what they end up doing if they try and barter their way to have that as a permanent host of one of the playoff locations or what, but it's not going to be near as exciting to go to a Rose Bowl game. And I don't know. It'll be interesting.
I mean, you're running the mill Meineke Car Care Bowl. That still tends to, they don't make those games, the Frisco Bowl generally has like 5,000 people at the stadium. That's usually garbage. But even those teeny tiny bowl games tend to outrate on TV whatever else you're going to watch. I mean, versus First Take, a First Take rerun on ESPN, or some rerun of something, or, put on Last Dance. Let's replay the Last Dance documentary because we got nothing else. So I don't think those bowl games, as much as we're like, why are there 35 bowl games? It's because they still make some money on them. At least the TV networks do. And that money ends up getting filtered down to the schools that participate in them. So unfortunately, none of that money goes directly into the players' hands, unless you got Odell Beckham that's literally on the sidelines handing cash to LSU players.
Right.
That was a few years ago, but no, I don't see those bowl games anywhere. I do see though them continuing to be less consequential than they were, even with it just being the college football playoff. Once the college football playoff started, if you don't make the playoff, like if you're Ole Miss, Ole Miss, I don't remember who their matchup was this past year when Matt Corral messed up his knee. But if you're Ole Miss, what was it? Pitt?
Was it Pitt?
It was Pitt. It was, because that's right. It was Corral versus Pickett. Yep. And but if you're Ole Miss, your goal is to win the SEC or finish second in the SEC, make the college football playoff. They're in a nice bowl game, but ultimately, what does it matter? It's just one final game in college, which that's what college sports is supposed to be. But now with this additional realignment, these bowl games are gonna mean even less, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree completely with that. And I guess, what do you see with this tying into the NIL? I know you wanted to talk about that, had some talking points on that. Do you see this being a huge factor too now with obviously the LA market comes into play with the conference alignments, and where do you see all this tying in?
Yeah, I just, there's been such an influx of money coming into sports all around, whether that's new NIL. I say, quote unquote new.
Yeah. I mean, it's just not made aware now.
Under
it's
the
not
table. It's not
correct.
It's not. Yes. It's just not walking up. Let's meet up for dinner and here's a briefcase of cash. Like that's not okay. By the way, when would that ever actually happen? Like a briefcase of cash, like outside of movies. Like right. You can fit, if you wanted to give a guy $100,000, you don't need a freaking briefcase to do it, even if it is cash. Like you literally just need a rubber band. I don't understand why in movies it's that kind of insane. I mean, it's movies, it's drama, but whatever. I don't want to jump the ship here too far. But no, I guess my point is just like over the past year, and I want to tie Live Golf into this too. I mean, over the past year, we've had a splitting of professional golf with Live being here now and the money that Live is able to offer. We've seen the idea of what used to be regional conferences, the Pac-12, Pacific Ocean, Pac-12, ACC, Atlantic Ocean, ACC. Big 12, I mean, Big 12, Big 10 doesn't sound very regional, but the SEC, Southeastern Conference, they've obviously, the Big 10 is now diving into the Pacific Ocean area. SEC is going to be diving into the ACC, Atlantic. So regional conferences, that whole idea is basically done. And that's all pretty much, at least within the NCAA, that's all due to TV money. And, the Big Ten, the deal that the Big Ten has with Fox, the deal that the SEC has with ABC, ESPN. We've heard the phrase, everybody's heard the phrase that money is the root of all evil. And, my personal opinion as somebody that is not seeing any of this money, if I were getting a check for this realignment, if I was getting a check from Fox, I'm all in. But as a fan, and generally I don't consider myself like a traditionalist. I'm always open to change. I understand that the only constant in this world, the only guarantee in this world is change. But ultimately, like I hate this movement of the PGA basically splitting up into two leagues, the NCAA going away from tradition. I mean, NCAA football and basketball, as sports fans, we don't love it because of the talent on the field. It's not even comparable to the talent that you see in the NFL or in the NBA. We love college football and college basketball for tradition and for rivalries and, the historic moments that happen within those rivalries, within those traditions. I mean, I'm going to go into the woods a little bit and go back to 2010 Badger football. David Gilreath's opening kickoff against Ohio State, who at that time was ranked number 1 in the country, at Camp Randall, night game. Brent Musburger on the call. I mean, that's maybe my all-time favorite Badger memory was Gilreath returning that opening kickoff. I can remember where I was. I just got chills. I can remember where I was, how I felt at that time, just that general excitement and the fact that it's, a night game at Camp Randall in Madison, and just that memory, that highlight, just that genuine rush of emotions that you feel. And the Badgers ended up winning that game 31-18, knocking off that number 1 team in the country. I believe that was a Terrell Pryor, Beanie Wells team. That if my memory serves me right.
That sounds right. I think for sure Terrell Pryor, but yeah, man, I
don't know. Beanie might be there.
Time ago. Yeah.
But now with this TV deal that the Big Ten has with Fox, night games at Camp Randall are kind of a thing of the past. And that's really sad. Those are some of the best memories. That's one of the best environments in college football for a night game. Same thing like at the Horseshoe, same thing at State College for Penn State games, Penn State home games, night games when they got the whiteout crowd. A lot of those games now are going to be those 11 a.m. kickoffs, noon kickoff for the East Coast, 9 a.m. kickoff for USC, UCLA games. So I guess that adjustment, the fact that this is all TV money is, it's every university, every conference chasing money. And, just the fact that, going back to money is the root of all evil. I wonder if this could be the downfall for people being truly in love with college football. Again, I'm open to some of these ideas. I try not to be a traditionalist, but I wonder if this could end up biting college sports in the ass by just chasing money. And following that same concept, that's what all of these live golfers have done. They're all chasing. It's just, it's hard. The temptation of that money obviously is extremely real. I can't say that I wouldn't do the same thing. I'm not trying to be a moralist here, but as Justin Thomas said himself, he just said, this sucks. Like, ultimately, this could result in golf almost cannibalizing itself by, instead of being one really strong union, one really strong league with all of the best players in the world competing against each other in one league, now you're splitting it up into two leagues, and that hurts the PGA, obviously, and it's a plus for live golf, but for the sport of golf in general, now I have to pay attention to, if I want to see all the best players in the world, I have to pay attention to two leagues. That's not ideal for the sport of golf and the future of golf. It's an easy, I put these two sports together, college football, or I guess college sports in general, and live. I put those two things together because these teams, these conferences are chasing easy money, immediate returns. But does it ultimately end up hurting the sport? Does it hurt the future of sports? Do our kids, do our grandkids, what do they grow up in? Do they grow up in where they have to pay attention to live and PGA to see the best of golf? Because that's really hard to do, given that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, live is going on. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, PGA is going on. So at least how it's currently constructed. So how do you split up your time? How does that affect the future of golf? Same thing with the NCAA. They're not going to, and I sound like, old man, get off my lawn when I say, they're not going to understand the tradition of the Big Ten, or they're not going to understand the tradition of the SEC, and how big, especially in the South, those rivalries between Alabama, LSU, Auburn, or Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Florida, Georgia, they're not going to understand how deep those rivalries really go. Same thing, because now the new SEC rivalry, Florida State, Miami, that's a new SEC rivalry. Like, that's weird. Like, that, the thought of it is just, it's just kind of weird. And again, I'm generally someone open to change and embracing it and accepting that this happens and that money really does run the world. But I don't know. I don't know if it's good for the future of college sports. I don't know if it's good for the future of golf. And I can go shit. I'm going to go and blame Netflix for a lot of this, because right now, the only thing that you have to watch live is sports. You can watch, there's no more like, oh, I got to see American Idol at 7 p.m. tonight, because that's the only time I'm going to be able to see it. So now sports is the only thing you have to watch live. And that's why networks are paying off the wazoo for these TV deals. And ultimately Fox, again, an LA based company. They're the ones, they had to have had a massive impact on USC and UCLA leaving the Pac-12 for the Big Ten, which they have a TV deal with. So thanks a lot, Netflix. You're screwing up our sports.
No, it'll be, again, it's going to take a while to get used to with some of this stuff. You're not going to see your classic rivalries go away anytime soon. You're still going to see Michigan, Ohio State. You're still going to see Wisconsin, Minnesota, but who knows? Maybe some of these teams, you get some bad blood between. You get, all it takes is one bad referee call at the end of a game and makes you hate that other team. And I mean, look at if, for example, Oregon were to join the conference. They've beaten us in 2 of the last couple of Rose Bowls that the Badgers have been to. So no, but I'm just saying that right there
I'm
gets
saying
you where
you're right. That is
can bring
you're
in
100% right. Like I made that sound because that pisses me off. So you're dead on about that. That's a good point.
And it also, a lot of people you went to school at USC, you went to school at Wisconsin, you went to school at Ohio State. Odds are a lot of people don't stay around where they went to school, and they might be out on the West Coast now. They might be out on the East Coast, and gives them a chance to go to games and maybe gets them more excited about their alma mater and that they can watch them at a reasonable time, potentially, if they're out, or can go even to a game in LA or wherever they're going to be at. So it's going to be weird, and change is always weird. We're so used to conferences, and conferences haven't really changed that much in a while, at least relevant wise. I mean, West Virginia went over to the Big 12, and it was, I mean, they had a couple of years in there with Geno Smith and stuff that they were relevant. Pat White,
Geno.
But otherwise, there hasn't really been any seismic moves yet. And I don't know. Yeah, the teams are just chasing after money, which that's what it's always going to be. I mean, look at free agency in any sport. A lot of guys are going to wherever they're going to get paid the most money. That's just
Tyreek Hill,
how everything goes. Yes. So I don't know. And live golf too, going to that comment. It's also weird right now, but who knows? Maybe down the road, Pat Monahan finally is just like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just embrace live. And maybe you have some tournaments where you could have team events where it's PGA versus live. You could have like even a Ryder Cup type format or something along those lines, where I think right now it's just, there's so much different stuff going on that maybe down the road we do have more interaction between the two leagues, or maybe all of a sudden the guys on the live are like, you know, I miss some of the PGA Tour events, and Pat Monahan's like, fine, you can come back and you can kind of go, or Jay Monahan is, my bad. But maybe he lets them come back in and everything. I mean, I can't remember who it was that won the tournament event out in Oregon this week, but he made more money in just this event than he had in any season in his entire career up to this point. So
it was Brandon Grace.
Yeah, Brandon Grace. And I think before that one season, he had won maybe in like the $3 or $4 million total throughout that season. He won more in one event.
$4.4 million by winning this live event.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a lot of money. I don't blame them necessarily for going over. Yeah, it sucks that we have to tune in and there's not a good way to watch live right now, but maybe down the road, if there's more golfers going in, there's more interest in it, they'll probably end up with a TV deal, because why not? Or on some streaming platform or something else where you can watch it more frequently. But it's just weird because we're so used to different things. There hasn't been a lot of change lately that it's just weird right now. It's a weird time for sports.
That's my thing, is like, as a fan, it's so much to like, it's good for us. It's good for content. So I'm down with that.
No, exactly.
Hashtag, follow us at Dead Arm Sports, Twitter, Instagram, follow our Facebook page, Dead Arm Sports. So it's good for us. It's good for Dead Arm Sports, mad content constantly. But as just a fan, it's exhausting to like almost keep up with this. And it's, again, to say this for the third time, I try not to view myself as a traditionalist, but part of what makes college sports amazing is the tradition, is Ohio State, Michigan, a longtime tradition. I struggle to see the same. You're never going to see the same rivalry of Ohio State, Michigan that with USC, Ohio State, USC. That's never going to be on the same level as Michigan.
No, but again, though, if Notre Dame gets thrown in, they have a history with USC, and that brings something else into the Big Ten. So, and again, Michigan, Ohio State wasn't a rivalry from day one. There's bad blood between them for a few matchups earlier on, and then it just kind of created this rivalry from there. That maybe that does happen, and obviously it's going to take some time, and maybe we'll see some of these rivalries spur up throughout our lifetime. And it's, like I said, it's going to take a while. Rivalries aren't built in one day, one matchup, but it can gain momentum over time, and maybe we will see that. It's just going to be weird though when you see USC coming into Camp Randall or the Badgers going there. It's just going to feel like a non-conference game earlier in the season. Yeah, it'll just be weird.
The plus side is it's going to be a super fun matchup. I really hope that, I mean, the NFL has it nailed down with like AFC versus NFC. I hope that college football does the same thing where
And
it's
that's where,
Big Ten, SEC, and somehow funnel in the rest of the country. But that's I guess that's the worry, is like, how do you funnel in the rest of the country? And ultimately, maybe we don't really give a shit about Washington State and Oregon State and some of these other, Syracuse. I mean, how much viewership do you really get in those games? Not shit in comparison to, obviously, USC, the Big Ten, and the SEC games. So I guess maybe it's like, who cares about the rest of those schools? But it does suck for the health of those schools, obviously. And I think that, you're eliminating a lot of your fan base when you eliminate those types of schools from being in major contention.
mm-hmm.
So I wonder about the long-term health and I'm going to, I guess, almost pivot off my own point and say, maybe also on the flip side, this could be really good, because college football really has become extremely regional, with it mostly being dominated by Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, the SEC schools, and then pretty much Ohio State. And that's about it, for at least in terms of the college football playoff. So maybe this, bringing in the LA market, maybe that does end up helping with broadening, getting more viewership out to the West Coast, having the LA market, having the West Coast actually care again about college football, and bringing some additional relevancy to the West Coast that has been lacking for decade and a half now, maybe, since USC was truly relevant. So I guess that's a positive. But there's plenty of positives. There's also some negatives, I think. And I just, money running things always makes me a little nauseous, but that's the reality of sports nowadays.
How the world runs. Yeah. No, I liked your idea too with the AFC, NFC for how the NFL does it. It'd be cool to have different divisions within these conferences. You could have the Western Division and the Big Ten, and keep some of those. Let's say it's two LA teams. You end up getting Washington and Oregon coming in, and maybe a Colorado, and that's your West Division. And they play each other every year, and then have a couple crossover games with the other ones. So you can still kind of keep your main rivalry teams that you have, or teams that you've historically played, and have some matchups that you've had issues with between or whatever, but you can kind of keep that going. And then you have division winners advance into the playoffs and add maybe a couple extra games into it and figure out a champion from there. It'd be pretty cool. And it'd be exciting to be able to cheer for some of those teams out West being part of the Big Ten when they go up and face an SEC team or something in a national championship.
For sure.
So I don't know. I think it's a good thing. I do agree with you that I hate when money runs everything, but that is the reality of the world.
Money makes the world turn. Money
Yes,
and
it
sex.
does.
That's
Money
what makes
in
the world go around.
Money in the John Deere Classic. John Deere. Yeah, it was a busy 4th of July weekend. Did not get to watch much golf, but JT Poston, wire-to-wire winner. So congrats to him.
Different JT, not your Justin Thomas.
It's correct. Yes, this guy's actual initials are JT. That's what he goes by. But no, it was not the strongest field. And again, had a live event going on this week and had some solid golfers that were a part of that tournament. And John Deere Classic hasn't historically been a very good tournament for top players in the world, but no, still exciting. I had to pivot off of my pick because Steve Stricker withdrew on Wednesday, so ended up going with Adam Hadwin. Texted Jill, but Hadwin did not make the cut, finished at even, and your pick is Sahith Theegala, a nice -12. So you got the 12 strokes back that you lost last week.
Yeah, he started off after Thursday. Theegala and Adam Hadwin started off both 12 shots back of the leader after Thursday, and we were texting back and forth basically saying like, yeah, we're screwed. Like, good picks, both of us.
Yes.
both finished 3 over after Thursday. But Theegala came back really strong. Friday put up a 6 under, Saturday put up a 6 under, Sunday put up a 3 under, and finished up 12 under. T16, pretty good finish considering he was like 60th place or something, or worse maybe after day one. So pretty nice comeback. I mean, I knew he had it in him though, you know. Yeah. He didn't have it in him when I picked him for the US Open.
No, he did not. He might have had something else going on that weekend, but not US Open golf.
Not participating as a non-participant, but did end up finishing 12 under. So I got those 12 strokes, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but feels like that may wrap up the Drew Locks here. We're gonna keep playing and find out how this finishes out, but losing those 12 strokes that's a hurt. That's a burner.
That was not something that I needed this week. Got just 2 months left. Got the Open Championship coming up in a couple weeks here, but otherwise, I'm gonna have to pretty much pick winners and hope that you don't make the cut in order to make a comeback. So we'll
good luck.
See what ends up happening. Yeah. Anything else to add from the John Deere gel before we close her out?
I that's about all I got. 4th of July weekend. I got to be honest. Golf was not, wasn't watching a whole lot of golf, spending time out on the boat and on the dock. So
same.
Not playing spike ball. We played that game where you got the, I don't know what it's called, but you put the beer bottle on top of this pole and you try to hit it with the
Beersby.
Yeah.
Beersby. Yep.
Beersby.
Yep.
Pretty easy. I probably should have been able to figure that one out.
Attaboy.
Played a lot of that.
Very nice. We can be found at Dead Arm Sports, Twitter, Instagram. Check us out on Facebook at Dead Arm Sports. Again, like Jell had mentioned earlier on in the episode, make sure you subscribe, click the bell on YouTube. That way you know when we drop live. And like I said, we keep that chat monitored so you can ask us any questions, fantasy football related, sports related, anything. A lot of people are going to be having their drafts coming up soon. So if you have any questions in regards to that, let us know. Again, we typically record on Monday and then possibly another day during the week. It's a little hectic right now with the summer schedule, but we'll get more regular once the fall rolls around. But for sure on Mondays, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. Send us a screenshot of that review, get you some sticker swag. If you want to follow Jell, he can be found at DasJel. That's at DASJEL. I can be found at DasJPEC. That's at DASJPEC. Make sure you subscribe to us, follow us. We usually push out some content on our socials, and make sure you follow at Dead Arm Sports as well. Jell, where can they listen to us at?
It is our presenting sponsor, Anchor, both on the web and via the app, Apple App Store, and Google Play, just by searching Anchor. You want to find it on the web, just go and hit anchor.fm into your URL box. They allow us to present all this gorgeous, beautiful magic to you for free onto whatever your chosen listening platform is, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Pods. Make sure on whatever your chosen listening platform is to subscribe, rate, and review. Additionally, again, as Josh said, hit us up on YouTube. Just go search Dead Arm Sports on that YouTube search bar. Dead Arm Sports channel should be right at the very top of the of your results. Hit subscribe, hit that bell.
Ding.
Ding. There we go. And you'll get alerts when we go live, when new videos are out and everything. Very, very important. And again, spread the news, spread the word, spread the episode glory, to your friends, family, dogs, pets, coworkers, enemies, friends and enemies, frenemies. Hey, we'll take your frenemies all day.
Yeah, that's a great way for us to help get more content out to you, help spread the word on our podcast. So we'd greatly appreciate that. Have some nice episodes coming up for you, fantasy related, for the next probably couple of weeks. We're going to go division by division, starting with the AFC East next episode, tell you who we like fantasy relevant wise and who we don't like. Maybe even give you a little top 3 guys that you're targeting in your drafts as well. So make sure you tune in on our Thursday release. Hit the AFC East, and Joe, close us out.
Sports probably needs to start listening to Notorious B.I.G. Mo money, mo